The average household quietly throws away hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars every year without realizing it. Not on vacations, not on cars, not even on major purchases. It disappears in tiny amounts. Half a loaf of bread that goes stale before anyone finishes it. Vegetables forgotten in the back of the refrigerator. Containers bought for storage. Air fresheners for odors. Special products for stains. Replacement items for things that could have lasted years longer with one simple trick. Most people assume that's just how a house works. My grandmother didn't. Last year, while helping clean out an old pantry and storage room, I found a wooden box sitting beneath a shelf of cookbooks and canning jars. It wasn't locked. It wasn't hidden. Judging by the dust, nobody had touched it for years. Inside were small handwritten cards. Not recipes. Not letters. Instructions, some were written on scraps of paper cut from grocery bags. Others looked like they had been copied from older notes decades earlier. One said, "Put salt with the candles." Another said, "Store apples away from potatoes." Another simply read, "Never throw away the bread ends." At first I thought I was looking at random household reminders. I was wrong. Because the deeper I looked, the stranger it became. These weren't recipes. They were shortcuts. Small household tricks collected over years' ways to make food last longer, stretch money further, keep things from wearing out, solve everyday problems, and avoid buying things people now assume they need. And the more I read, the more one question started bothering me. If ordinary families once lived this way for decades, what exactly happened? When did we start paying for solutions people used to create for free? Stay with me, because what I found written on one of those cards started with something most people throw into the trash every week. And by the end, I'll show you the household trick that made me realize I had been spending money on the same problem for years without even noticing it. The bread end rule. One of the smallest cards inside Grandma's box contained only 4 words. Never throw away bread. At first, that didn't seem unusual. But another card tucked behind it said something different. Keep the ends. Grandma never viewed the end pieces of bread as leftovers. To her, they were ingredients waiting for another purpose. The heels of a loaf became breadcrumbs. Dry slices became stuffing. Stale bread became pudding. Even small pieces were saved in a tin and later crushed for casseroles, meatloaf, or fried coatings. Nothing was wasted simply because it wasn't immediately useful. Today, millions of households throw away bread every week because it becomes dry before anyone finishes it. And modern stores quietly benefit from that habit because food that gets thrown away has to be replaced. Grandma understood something many people forget. I thought the bread cards were simply about saving food. I was wrong, because the next lesson in the box explained why Grandma's vegetables seemed to last nearly twice as long as ours. Vegetables became soup. Bones became broth. Fruit became jam. Nothing was judged by whether it looked fresh, only whether it still had value. And perhaps that's why food lasted so much longer in her kitchen than it does in many homes today. But the bread cards led to something even stranger, because several notes mentioned 2 foods that modern refrigerators often place side by side. Grandma wrote, "Keep apples away from potatoes." At first, I assumed it was some kind of old superstition. It wasn't. The fruit separation rule. Grandma understood that certain foods quietly affect each other. Apples release natural gases as they ripen. Potatoes absorb them. Stored together, one often causes the other to spoil faster. The same was true for onions. Bananas, tomatoes. She didn't need special containers. She didn't need preservation gadgets. She simply knew where things belonged. One card had small drawings showing shelves and baskets. Another listed foods that should never touch. What surprised me wasn't the trick itself. It was realizing how much money disappears because food spoils a few days earlier than it should. A bag of potatoes here, a few apples there, some forgotten produce at the back of the refrigerator. Tiny losses that don't seem important until they happen every week for years. Modern kitchens often rely on storage products, special containers, freshness bags, vacuum systems. But Grandma's solution was often simpler: knowledge, because understanding how food behaves costs nothing. And it prevents many of the problem stores now sell products to solve. But the next card may have saved her even more money, because it involves something nearly every household buys repeatedly without ever asking why. The candle and salt trick. The note itself was almost impossible to read. Put salt with the candles. That was all it said. No explanation, no instructions, just those 4 words. Later, I discovered what she meant. Grandma often stored candles with a small dish of salt nearby, and sometimes soaked candle bases briefly before use. She believed it helped candles burn more slowly and reduce dripping. Whether every method worked perfectly mattered less than the habit behind it. She took care of things before using them. Candles lasted longer. Soap bars lasted longer. Clothes lasted longer. Kitchen tools lasted longer. Nothing was treated as disposable. Today, many products are designed around replacement. Use it. Throw it away. Buy another. But Grandma's generation often asked a different question. How do I make this last? That mindset alone saved enormous amounts of money. And perhaps that's why another note appeared several times throughout the box. Use all of it. The full use rule. Grandma rarely believed an item had only one purpose. Glass jars became storage containers. Coffee tins held buttons. Worn towels became cleaning cloths. Bacon grease was saved for cooking. Paper bags became notepaper. Old sheets became quilt material. Broken furniture provided spare wood. Nothing left the house until every possible use had been considered. Today, companies often make money by convincing people that every problem requires a new product. Need storage? Buy containers. Need cleaning cloths? Buy wipes. Need organizers? Buy bins. Need fresheners? Buy sprays. Grandma often solved those same problems with things already sitting inside the house. And the savings weren't only financial. There was a certain confidence in knowing you could solve problems yourself. That confidence appeared in almost every card. One note simply read, "Look here before buying," as though the answer might already be somewhere inside the home. But perhaps the most surprising card involves something many people purchase every month without thinking. Air fresheners. Grandma's kitchen smell trick. Grandma disliked covering odors. She preferred removing them. A small card listed several things: vinegar, lemon peels, baking soda, simmering water, open windows. To her, smells usually had causes: trash, moisture, food, stale air. And solving the cause often solved the smell itself. Today, entire aisles are dedicated to making homes smell different. Sprays, plug-ins, gels, scented oils, automatic dispensers. Yet Grandma's solutions often cost almost nothing. A bowl of baking soda in the refrigerator. Citrus peels simmering on the stove. Fresh air whenever possible. Simple habits repeated for decades. And while reading those cards, one sentence kept appearing again and again. A clean house costs less. I assumed she meant cleaning. She didn't. And the next habit may explain why her refrigerator, sewing machine, and kitchen tools lasted longer than many modern replacements. It was about maintenance. Grandma cleaned the tools. She cleaned appliances. She cleaned furniture. She cleaned sewing machines, fans, lamps, and kitchen utensils. Not because she enjoyed cleaning, because dirt destroys things. Dust shortens the life of machines. Moisture creates damage. Grease causes wear. Neglect becomes replacement. Many expensive household problems begin as small maintenance problems. A clogged vent, a dirty filter, a neglected appliance, a loose hinge. Grandma rarely waited for things to break. She cared for them while they still worked. And perhaps that is why so many of her belongings survived for decades. Not because they were built differently, but because they were treated differently. Yet buried near the bottom of the box was a note that may have explained all the others. Only 6 words. Use what you have first. At first, it seemed obvious, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how unusual that advice has become. Because modern life often encourages the opposite. Buy first. Replace first. Upgrade first. Grandma's rule was different. Before buying anything, she looked around the house. Could something already solve the problem? Could something be repaired? Could something be reused? Could something be shared? And surprisingly often, the answer was yes. That small pause between wanting and buying may have saved her more money than every other trick combined. Because companies can only sell solutions to problems we believe we have. Grandma spent her entire life proving that many of those solutions were already sitting inside the home. But there was one card that didn't mention food. It didn't mention cleaning. It didn't mention storage. In fact, it contained only one sentence: save the jars. At first, that sounded almost ridiculous. Today, glass jars are often thrown away without a second thought. Pasta sauce jars, jam jars, pickle jars, coffee containers. They go into recycling bins, and people purchase storage containers later. Grandma saw that differently. The jar rule. Every jar had potential. Small jars stored spices. Larger jars held rice, beans, flour, buttons, nails, sewing supplies, and leftovers. Some became drinking glasses. Others became candle holders. A few were used year after year for preserves. What surprised me was not that she reused jars. It was how many modern products exist to replace something families once received for free. Storage containers, pantry organizers, kitchen canisters, craft containers, decorative jars. Entire sections of stores now sell things Grandma's generation often found in the trash. One note said, "Never buy what arrives free." And perhaps that's why so many of her shelves looked different. Nothing matched perfectly. But everything had a purpose. Today, many companies sell organization. Grandma practiced it. And while looking through the wooden box, I noticed something even stranger. Several cards mentioned the same ingredient over and over. Baking soda. The one-box household solution. One card said, "For shoes." Another said, "For the sink." Another, "For smells." Another, "For stains." Grandma treated baking soda almost like a household toolbox. It cleaned silver, freshened refrigerators, removed odors from carpets, helped clean pans, absorbed moisture, softened certain cleaning jobs. One inexpensive box handled problems that now fill entire store aisles. Deodorizers, special cleaners, fresheners, scrubbing products, odor removers. And perhaps that's what bothered me most while reading those cards. Many of these problems haven't changed. Only the number of products sold to solve them has changed. Companies often divide one solution into 10 products. Grandma often used one product for 10 solutions. The same thing happened with vinegar. The vinegar card. Grandma wrote, "If it shines glass, it cleans much more." Vinegar appeared everywhere in the notes. Windows, coffee pots, kettles, stains, odors, hard water, laundry. She wasn't trying to save money by being difficult. She simply disliked buying unnecessary things. Modern marketing often teaches specialization. One product for this, another for that, a third for something slightly different. Grandma preferred versatility. One item, many jobs. And over decades, those decisions added up. Not $5, not $20, hundreds, perhaps thousands. But one of the most interesting cards involved clothing. Because Grandma seemed almost offended by the idea of throwing clothes away. The men before, by rule. A missing button, a loose seam, a small tear, a broken zipper. Today, many garments are discarded for problems that take only minutes to repair. Grandma kept thread, needles, buttons saved from old clothes. Small pieces of fabric. Nothing seemed unusual about that to her. One card read, 5 minutes now saves $50 later. She understood that small repairs protect larger investments. And this wasn't only about clothing, it was about furniture, curtains, blankets, kitchen tools, almost everything. Modern products often have replacement cycles. Grandma had repair cycles, and repair costs almost nothing compared to replacement. But perhaps the most surprising lesson in the entire box involves something people throw away every single day. Water. Save the water. Several cards mentioned leftover water. Water from boiled vegetables. Water from rinsing produce. Water waiting for heat. Rainwater. At first, I didn't understand why. Then I realized Grandma wasted almost nothing. Vegetable water sometimes became soup stock. Cooled water fed plants. Collected rainwater watered gardens. Even small amounts had value. Today, utilities often seem invisible. Turn the tap. Use it. Forget it. Grandma's generation remembered times when resources were not guaranteed. That memory created habits, and habits created savings. One note simply said, waste becomes expensive when repeated. Perhaps that's the real lesson hidden inside these cards. Because almost every trick followed the same pattern. Slow down. Use what you have. Fix what you can. Save what still works. Question what needs replacing. And above all, pay attention. Because many companies depend on one thing. They depend on people believing that convenience is always cheaper. Grandma's notes quietly argued the opposite, that a little knowledge often costs nothing and saves far more than most people realize. But there was one final card folded separately from all the others. It wasn't about food. It wasn't about cleaning. It wasn't about saving leftovers. In faded pencil, she had written only 8 words. Throw nothing away until tomorrow. At first, it seemed strange. But after reading everything else, I realized this single habit may have explained the entire box. When I closed the wooden box and placed the cards back inside, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me when I first found them. Grandma's household hacks were never really about bread. They weren't about jars. They weren't about baking soda. They weren't even about saving money. They were about attention. Because most households don't lose money all at once. They lose it a little at a time. A forgotten vegetable, a duplicate purchase, a product bought to solve a problem that could have been solved for free, a replacement for something that still had years left, a convenience that slowly becomes a monthly expense, and over time, those tiny leaks become surprisingly expensive. Grandma understood something many people have forgotten. A home doesn't become expensive because of one large mistake. It becomes expensive because of hundreds of small habits repeated every day. The truth is, most of the tricks in those cards weren't secret. People simply stopped passing them down. Companies didn't need to invent new problems. They only needed families to forget the old solutions. Because a person who knows how to make food last longer buys less food. A person who repairs things buys fewer replacements. A person who uses what they already own needs fewer products. And a household that wastes less often needs far less money than people imagine. Perhaps that's why one sentence appeared more than any other throughout those cards. Use what you have first. Simple words. But they explain nearly every trick Grandma collected over a lifetime. She wasn't trying to live without modern conveniences. She wasn't trying to make life harder. She was trying to make sure that money only left the house when it truly needed to. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. Most of the things Grandma taught cost absolutely nothing. No subscriptions, no special products, no expensive organizers, no miracle solutions. Just patience, attention, and the belief that many problems can be solved before money ever becomes involved. The old wooden box now sits on my own shelf. The cards are still worn. The handwriting is still fading. But every time I read them, I find the same lesson hiding between the lines. A careful home wastes less, and a home that wastes less often worries less too. Because Grandma's $0 household hacks were never really buried. They were simply forgotten. And perhaps the companies that profit from replacing, upgrading, throwing away, and buying again would prefer they stay that way.